43 years on this earth, 18 of them working search and rescue with the RCMP in Northern Ontario, and the moment that made me understand what I was actually capable of didn't happen on a frozen lake or a collapsed trail in Algonquin. It happened at a dinner table in Oakville, at my daughter's house, on a Sunday afternoon in November, when the man she married looked at her across a pot roast she'd spent 4 hours making and told her she was embarrassing herself, and his sister laughed. My name is Stephen Carver, retired RCMP Search and Rescue Coordinator, 18 years out of the Sudbury Detachment and 2 years out of a desk job in Barrie that I took because my knees were done with the field. I have spent the better part of my adult life making decisions in kitchen call means someone doesn't come home. I have kept my voice steady in whiteouts at -30. I have talked panicking people back from ledges, literal and otherwise. I know how to stay functional when everything in my body is telling me to react, so understand what it took to sit at that dinner table and not move. Everything. It took everything I had. Let me back up. My daughter Ellie is 29. She has her mother's way of laughing, the kind that starts quiet and then takes over her whole face. And she has my stubbornness, which has served her well in most areas of her life and cost her dearly in at least one. She married Tristan 3 years ago at a venue in Burlington that cost more than the truck I drove for a decade and a half and liked considerably more. I walked her down the aisle. I danced with her to a song her mother picked out before she passed. I meant every second of both. Tristan 32. He manages client accounts at a mid-sized financial advisory firm in Mississauga called Farrow Capital Group. He went to Western, which he mentions the way some people mention the weather, constantly and without being asked about. He has the handshake of a man who read a book about handshakes. The first time I met him, I thought, this one has rehearsed being likable. I didn't say that to Ellie. I told her he seemed like a sharp guy. That was generous of me, and I have spent considerable time since regretting the generosity. His sister is Renata 35. She teaches high school drama in Hamilton and has strong opinions about most things and the volume to back them up. She and Tristan have the particular dynamic of siblings who have spent their whole lives performing for each other, laughing at each other's jokes a beat too hard, backing each other up a second too fast. Their mother, Corinne Bauer, is 61 and lives in Ancaster. She was not there that Sunday. I mention Corinne because she becomes relevant later and not in a way she would have chosen. The four of us, me, Ellie, Tristan, and Renata, were at Ellie and Tristan's house on Chartwell Road in Oakville. Sunday, November 10th, Ellie had made pot roast, roasted carrots, mashed potatoes, the kind of meal you make when you want things to feel normal. She'd been in that kitchen since 11 in the morning. I know because I'd arrived at noon with a bottle of Ontario Red and offered to help, and she'd handed me a glass and told me to sit down and talk to her, which I did, because it was the kind of afternoon where she seemed to need company more than assistance. Tristan and Renata arrived together at 1:30. I noticed, though I didn't remark on it, that neither of them commented on the food when they walked in. Not one word about the smell of it, the effort of it. They went straight to the living room and started a conversation about something that had happened at Renata's school. A conversation they were already in the middle of when they came through the door. Ellie put dinner on the table at 2 o'clock. She brought everything out herself, because I offered to help carry, and Tristan said, and I am quoting him accurately, "She's got it, Steve." Not Stephen. Steve. He has called me that from the second month they were dating, and I have never corrected him because Ellie asked me not to, and there is a long list of things I let go for the same reason. We were 20 minutes into the meal when it started. Ellie had mentioned, carefully and briefly, that she was thinking about going back to school. She has a background in environmental science from Guelph, works currently as a coordinator for a nonprofit in Toronto focused on watershed conservation, and she'd been looking at a graduate program at U of T. She brought it up lightly, the way you bring something up when you've been thinking about it for a while and aren't sure yet how the room is going to receive it. Tristan put his fork down, not dramatically, just set it on the edge of his plate. The way someone does when they've decided the conversation is more important than the meal and wants you to know it. "We've talked about this," he said. "I know," Ellie said. "I'm just saying I'm still thinking about it." "You're still thinking about something we already decided." "We didn't decide. You said you didn't think the timing was right, and I said I'd think about it." Tristan looked at Renata. And Renata smiled. Not a kind smile. The smile of someone watching something play out the way they expected it to and finding that satisfying. "Ellie," Tristan said, his voice dropping to the particular register men use when they want to sound reasonable but mean something else. You're embarrassing yourself. You know that, right? The table went quiet. Each face. I know my daughter's face in most of its configurations. I have been watching it since the moment she was born. Did something I recognized and hoped I would never see again. It went careful. The kind of careful that isn't calm. The kind that means someone has had to learn how to make themselves smaller and has gotten very good at it. I'm not embarrassing myself, she said quietly. I'm having a conversation. Renata laughed, actual laughter, short and dismissive, the way you laugh at something that doesn't deserve a full response. The program is $70,000, Ellie. That's not a conversation, that's a fantasy. I need to stop here and tell you something about the 18 years I spent in search and rescue, because it matters to what happened next. The most dangerous moment in any rescue isn't the moment of crisis. It's the moment right after you find the person, because that's when your body wants to release everything it's been holding, and releasing it too fast, in the wrong way, can compromise the whole operation. The training is about containing that release, directing it, using it instead of losing it. I have never in my professional life had to apply that training to anything as hard as I applied it to the next 90 seconds at that dinner table. My hands were flat on the table. I was aware of them the way you're aware of your footing on ice, specifically and deliberately, because if I stopped being aware of them, I wasn't sure what they'd do. Ellie looked at her plate. That was the thing. That was the specific thing that cost me. Not the words, not Renata's laugh, not Tristan's voice. It was the way Ellie looked at her plate. Like she had done this enough times that looking down was automatic now. Like the table was a place she knew to retreat to. I picked up my phone. I had it on the table because my sister had been texting me this afternoon about our mother's upcoming 80th birthday, and I'd been checking it periodically. It was already face up. I opened the camera the way I've opened it 10,000 times and I pressed record. I did it without lifting the phone, without making a gesture of it. 18 years of working with people in distress teaches you to control your body language in a way that most people never need to learn. The phone sat on the table beside my water glass, facing forward, looking like a phone sitting on a table. Tristan was still talking. He'd moved on to something about Ellie's timeline, her earning potential, the mortgage they were carrying. Each sentence delivered with the careful patience of a man who considers himself very reasonable and wants witnesses to that reasonableness. Renata was nodding. Ellie was still looking at her plate. I let it run. I watched the food getting cold and I let it run. Then I set the phone face down, folded my napkin, and put it beside my plate. That was a wonderful meal, Ellie. I set it at a normal volume. No edge in it. I mean that. Tristan blinked. He hadn't expected a redirect. I'm going to head out, I said, but before I do, I looked at Ellie, not at either of them. Give me a call tonight, okay? Whenever you're ready. Something moved across her face. I don't know exactly what, but she recognized something in mine, the thing that probably looks like stillness from the outside, but isn't stillness at all, and she nodded. I thanked them for having me. I said goodbye to Renata, who looked mildly confused, which I found professionally satisfying. I shook Tristan's hand with the same grip he always uses on me, the one that's slightly too firm to be accidental, and I said, enjoy the rest of your afternoon. I drove home to my house in Burlington. I made tea. I sat at the kitchen table and played the video back 4 times. I had what I needed. At 9:14 that night, Ellie called. I could tell from the first 2 words, "Hey Dad," that she had either been crying recently or was trying not to start. Tell me something, I said, and I need you to be honest with me. A pause. How long has this been going on? A longer pause. Dad, Ellie. She was quiet for almost a full minute. I didn't fill it. I've sat in silences longer than that, waiting for people to tell me what I needed to know, and I understand that rushing them costs you more than waiting. It's not always like that, she said finally. The specific phrasing of someone who has been parsing their own experience into categories for long enough that the categories feel like facts. How often is it like that? She was quiet again. When did it start? It wasn't like this at the beginning. He gets stressed with work and he takes it out. She stopped. It's not physical, she said, quickly, like that was important to establish. It's never been physical. It's just the way he talks. The way he and Renata both talk. Both of them. I hadn't been sure about that part. How long, Ellie? About 2 years. 2 years. She had been managing this for 2 years without telling me. I knew why. I know my own reputation, what my kids have seen me do when I'm angry, or rather what they've seen me do to contain what I do when I'm angry, and the containing is probably more alarming than the anger itself. She was protecting him, or protecting me from myself, or protecting some idea she still had about the marriage being something she could fix if she was patient enough. Okay, I said. Here's what's going to happen. Tonight, nothing. You don't say anything to him about this call. Tomorrow morning I'm going to make a couple of calls and I'll let you know what comes of them. You don't have to do anything yet. Dad, I don't want this to turn into Ellie. I kept my voice the way I kept it on the worst nights in the field, steady, not because I felt steady, but because steady was what the situation required. He called you embarrassing in front of your family, at your table with a meal you cooked, and his sister laughed. Silence. I know, she said, very quietly. I'm not going to do anything that makes things worse for you. I promise you that. But I need you to let me work. A long pause. Us. Okay, one word. But the weight of 2 years behind it. I made 2 calls that evening. The first was to my friend Carol Thiessen. Carol is not someone I would describe as a friend in the way most people use the word. She is a former colleague. She worked family and domestic files out of the Hamilton detachment for 15 years before moving into victim services coordination. She is methodical, unsentimental, and the best person I know for understanding exactly what a situation is and what it isn't. She picked up on the 3rd ring. Stephen, it's late. I know. I'm awake. What's going on? My daughter's husband has been degrading her in front of people for approximately 2 years. I have it on video from tonight. I want to know what her options look like. A pause. Not surprised. Carol is never surprised. Just processing. Ontario? Oakville? Halton region? Is it physical? She says no. Verbal, repeated pattern of behavior. Tonight his sister participated. You recorded it? I did. Clear audio, clear faces. Okay. Her voice shifted to the register I recognized. Not friend anymore. Professional. You need a family law lawyer first. Who do you know? No one in that space. I'll get you a name. There's a woman in Burlington, Sharon Mack, family law, 15 years. She's good and she won't waste your daughter's time. Call her first thing tomorrow. Tell her Carol Thiessen referred you. Good. Stephen. A pause. Does Ellie want to leave? Ellie wants to save her marriage. I know, that's common. Another pause. What she needs right now is options she doesn't know she has. A good family lawyer will show her what the situation actually looks like on paper. That's different from you telling her, I understand. Stevens. Her voice was careful. Whatever you're feeling about this man, keep it in the truck. It's already in the truck. I could hear her exhale. Good. I'll text you Sharon Mack's number in the morning. The second call was to my brother-in-law, Eddie Varga. Eddie is Trish's brother. Trish, my wife, who I lost 4 years ago to a brain aneurysm on a Thursday afternoon in April that I have never fully made sense of. Eddie is 60, works in commercial real estate in Hamilton, and knows approximately everyone in that part of Ontario, in the way that people who grew up there and never left tend to know everyone. He also, as it happens, went to university with someone who works in HR at a consulting firm that does compliance audits for mid-size financial advisory companies. I didn't call Eddie to ask him to do anything specific. I called Eddie because I needed to think out loud to someone who would understand the shape of what I was dealing with, and because after 18 years in the RCMP I have learned that information networks matter, and you tend not to know which one you need until you need it. Eddie listened. Tristan Bauer, he said when I finished. Farrow Capital, the Mississauga office. You know them? I know of them. Boutique firm. About 40 advisors. They do a lot of high net worth client work. Reputation matters a lot to that type of operation. What kind of conduct policies do firms like that tend to carry? Eddie understood the question. The kind that make personal behavior a professional issue if it generates the wrong kind of attention. That's what I thought, Stephen. He was quiet for a moment. How's Ellie? She's tired, I said. She's been tired for about 2 years and she's just now starting to realize how tired. What do you need from me? Just keep the Farrow Capital thing in the back of your mind. Consider it kept. I hung up and sat in my kitchen for a while. The house was quiet in the way it gets quiet when it's just you and the sound of the furnace and the memory of everyone who used to fill up the rooms. I thought about Trish, the way I always do when something hard happens, the specific ache of wanting to tell her something and knowing there's nowhere to put it. Then I made a list. Old habit. The kind of methodical, line-by-line list-making that got me through 2 decades of working situations where improvising cost lives. Sharon Mack, Burlington, first thing Monday. Carol's documentation advice. Ellie's text history. Everything. Farrow Capital's public conduct policy. Their website. Renata, Bauer, 35, drama teacher. Hamilton Wentworth District School Board. I stopped on that last line for a moment. Thought about what a recording of a teacher laughing at a student, or in this case, a sister-in-law, while someone was being told they were embarrassing themselves might look like in the context of a professional conduct review. Then I kept writing. Monday morning I was in Sharon Mack's office in Burlington by 8:30. She is 51, short, with the kind of directness that doesn't waste breath on cushioning. Carol had clearly already spoken to her because she had a notepad open before I sat down. "Tell me the situation," she said. I told her. I played her the video. She watched it once, then asked me to play it again with the volume up. She made a note. "The verbal pattern is what family law calls coercive control," she said. Ontario's Divorce Act was amended in 2021 to explicitly recognize coercive control as a form of family violence. The behavior in this video is consistent with a documented pattern. If we can establish the pattern, she has text messages going back 2 years. Sharon's pen stopped. "How many?" "I don't know yet. Enough that she mentioned it when I asked. I need those texts. Screenshotted, dated, preserved." "Can your daughter do that in the next 48 hours? "Yes. The video is helpful, but it's not a criminal matter based on what's in it. What it is documentation. It establishes the dynamic. Combined with the text history, it becomes a pattern. And a pattern is what changes how this looks in a courtroom." She doesn't want to go to a courtroom. Most people don't at first. Sharon looked at me steadily. What she wants right now doesn't have to be what she decides in 2 months. My job is to make sure she has the information to make a real decision, not the decision of someone who thinks they have no options. I looked at her. "Carol said you were good." Carol is right. $850 a day plus disbursements. I'll waive the first consultation. Don't. Excuse me? Don't waive it. Do the work and bill for it. All of it. She looked at me for a moment. Then she smiled, very briefly. All right, I drove from Burlington to Ellie's office in Toronto that afternoon. I hadn't told her I was coming. I texted her from the parking lot. She came down in her coat and we walked along the lakeshore for 45 minutes in the cold November air, and I let her talk. About the first time. About the way the first time seemed small enough to dismiss, and then the second time seemed explainable. And then there was a whole architecture of small explainable things that she'd been living inside. For so long she'd stopped noticing the walls. She showed me her phone, messages going back 26 months. After incident texts in the particular language of men who want to establish that they aren't the problem. The apologies framed as corrections. The warmth offered as reward for compliance. The "I love you, but you made me do that" construction that she'd filed away and never shown anyone because she kept hoping the next file would be the last one. I took photos of every screen. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. Not with accusation. I kept it simple. She was quiet for a while, watching the lake. "Because I knew what it would do to you," she said. "And because I thought if I just..." She stopped. "Mom would have known what to do," she said. "She was good at that, knowing what to do." "Your mom had excellent instincts," I said. "She would have seen through him faster than I did, probably." I looked at the water. "But she'd also have been proud of you for surviving it this long, Ellie. That's not nothing." She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she put her arm through mine the way she used to when she was small, just leaned into me as we walked. "What are you building?" she asked. Because she knows me well enough to know that when I get quiet, I'm not standing still. "A door," I said. "You still have to walk through it yourself, but I'm going to make sure it's there." If you've been listening for a while and want stories like this to keep coming, hitting the subscribe button really does help. 97% of people never do, but it's what keeps all of this going. Thank you. Thursday of that week, 3 things. First, Sharon Mack called at 8:40 to say she had reviewed the 26 months of text documentation Ellie had sent over the previous 2 days. Her exact words were, "Stephen, this is comprehensive. This is not a gray area." She had already drafted a formal documentation package. Second, Carol Thiessen called at 10 to tell me she'd had an informal conversation with someone in Halton Region's Victim Services Unit. Not a report, an inquiry. Enough to establish that if Ellie ever wanted to formalize anything, the pathway existed and was clear. Third, at 2 in the afternoon, I got a text from Eddie Varga. It said, "Farrow Capital has a client conduct and personal ethics clause, standard for firms of their type, regulated under IROC. Any behavior that brings the firm into reputational disrepute is grounds for review. I know how to pass information to the right people there. If it comes to that, up to you." I sat at my kitchen table and read that text 3 times. Then I replied, "Not yet, let me see what Ellie decides," he replied. "Understood, it'll keep." Ellie called me Friday evening. She'd been to see Sharon Mack that afternoon alone, which was her decision and the right one. "She's thorough," Ellie said. "She is. She explained the coercive control thing, the 2021 amendment. A pause. I didn't know that was a legal framework. Neither did I before Monday. She said I have options. A longer pause. She said that word a lot, options. I don't think I've had a lot of those in the last 2 years. You've always had them. We just needed to make them visible. She was quiet for a moment. He's been telling Renata things, she said, about me. About the school program. Renata texted me this afternoon, one of those texts that's pretending to be helpful, telling me she's worried about my mental state and maybe I should talk to someone. I kept my voice level. What did you say back? Nothing yet. Good. Don't respond until you've talked to Sharon, Dad. A pause. Is this going to work? I thought about 18 years of operations that came down to decisions made in bad conditions with incomplete information. I thought about every time I had to tell someone we were still looking, because that was what was true, and truthful was what the situation required. I think it depends on what you decide you want, I said. But I can tell you this, whatever you decide, you will not be making it without knowing what the ground actually looks like. That part I can give you. That's the most dad thing you've ever said. I've been saying it for 29 years. You're just hearing it now, she laughed. It sounded like her. The real version, the one that starts quiet over her face. The following weeks moved the way a well-run operation moves. Not fast, not dramatic. Steady. Sharon Mack filed for separation on Ellie's behalf in the 3rd week of November. She structured it around documented coercive control, the text history, the video, and 2 specific incidents Ellie had photographed and kept on a private cloud drive. Nothing physical, but evidence of property that had been destroyed during incidents and that Ellie had quietly documented without telling anyone, because some part of her must have always known she'd need it. Tristan's lawyer filed a response within a week. It was aggressive, which Sharon had predicted, and it made a series of claims about Ellie's mental state and decision-making that were almost certainly based on things Tristan had been telling Renata, and Renata had been reflecting back. Sharon read the response, said, standard, and sent back documentation that I can only describe as a wall. A complete, flat, documented wall. The lawyer went quiet for 11 days. That silence has a sound. I've heard it in interview rooms and over radios in the field, and in the offices of people who have just realized the situation is not what they believed it to be. It's the sound of a strategy being reconsidered from the ground up. I texted Eddie on a Wednesday in early December. The separation is filed. Lawyer has gone quiet. If there's a moment to let Farrow Capital know their employee is in active family court proceedings involving documented coercive control and a video record, that moment might be now. Your call on how to handle the logistics, he replied within the hour. Consider it handled, professionally and quietly. I didn't ask for the details. I trusted Eddie to know the register to use, the way you trust a good partner in the field to know how loud to be and when. I found out later, from Ellie, that Tristan was called into a meeting with HR and his managing director at Farrow Capital the following Monday. She knew because he called her, which he was not supposed to do under the terms of the separation agreement, and left a voicemail that was equal parts furious and bewildered, which told me he genuinely had not seen it coming. He had believed, until that Monday morning, that what happened in a marriage stayed in a marriage. He was wrong on that point. Renata called Ellie twice during that period. Ellie didn't answer. On the second call, Renata left a voicemail that Ellie played for me once on speaker and then deleted. It was lengthy. It contained the words, your father, approximately 9 times, overreaction 4 times, and family business 3 times. It did not contain anything resembling an apology. What it did contain, about halfway through, was a reference to the Hamilton-Wentworth District School Board, and how the last thing any of us needs is this becoming a public issue that affects people's professional lives, which told me that someone, possibly Tristan's lawyer, possibly Corinne, possibly someone else in the chain, had mentioned to Renata that a video of a high school drama teacher laughing while a woman was told she was embarrassing herself was exactly the kind of content that school boards have opinions about. I had not made any contact with the school board. I had not sent the video anywhere except to Sharon Mack as evidence. I had not asked anyone else to. Sometimes building the door is enough. Sometimes people see the door and start running before anyone opens it. Tristan accepted the separation terms in the 2nd week of December, 33 days after the Sunday dinner in Oakville. His lawyer, after 11 days of quiet and presumably a frank conversation about the state of the evidence, had apparently advised him that contesting the separation in an Ontario courtroom, while a video and 26 months of text documentation existed, was not a strategy with good outcomes. He signed on a Friday. Sharon called me that afternoon. Done, she said, filed. Ellie's free to pursue divorce after the mandatory 1-year separation period. With all the documentation in place to make it straightforward, how did his lawyer take it? Professionally. A pause. His client was less professional, but not our problem. And the Farrow Capital situation? Not my area, but from what I understand, he's still employed but on a performance improvement plan that makes his position precarious. That's independent of us. Good, Stephen. A pause. You built this cleanly. Everything you did was what you were supposed to do. I drank my coffee. December light in Burlington, the particular gray-white of an Ontario winter that Trish always said she didn't love but that I've always thought is honest. It doesn't pretend to be something it isn't. How's Ellie? Sharon asked. She's working on it, I said. She's going to be fine. 2 days later, Ellie came over with a bottle of Niagara Peninsula Red and a container of butter tarts from the bakery in her neighborhood that she knows I like. She put them on the kitchen table and sat down across from me and looked like someone who had set down a weight, so gradually they hadn't noticed how light they felt until just now. He called again, she said. I didn't pick up. Good. It's strange, she said, wrapping both hands around her mug. I thought I'd feel worse. I thought it would feel like failure. Does it? She thought about it. Ellie has always taken her time with questions. She doesn't give you the answer she thinks you want. She gives you the one that's actually true. It feels like the first week of January, she said finally, after Christmas, when everything goes quiet and you have time to just figure out what you actually want. I looked at her across the table. She had her mother's eyes, dark and quick, and she had my stubbornness, which I was more grateful for that afternoon than I had ever been before. What do you actually want? I asked. The grad program, she said, without hesitating. U of T, I'm going to apply in January. I raised my mug. She raised hers. To January, she said. Tristan Bauer, as of December, was on a performance improvement plan at Farrow Capital and living in a rental in Streetsville. Renata had, according to Ellie's one mutual friend who remained in contact with both of them, gone quiet. Not the strategic quiet of a legal proceeding, but the quiet of someone who had said something on a recorded afternoon and was now aware of that recording's existence. Corinne Bauer had sent Ellie a card, a physical card, through the mail. It said that she was sorry for how things had gone and that she hoped Ellie was doing well. It didn't say anything about her son or her daughter. Ellie showed it to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. What do you think that means? She asked. I think it means she knows, I said, and she chose the right language for what she knows. Ellie put the card in a drawer. Not the garbage, a drawer. I noticed that. Sharon Mack's final invoice arrived on the 28th of December. I paid it in full plus a note of thanks, which Sharon's paralegal emailed back to say was unnecessary but appreciated. I filed the separation documentation in the same drawer where I keep Ellie's old report cards and the photograph of her on her first day of kindergarten. The one where she's wearing Trish's old rain hat because it was raining that morning and she refused a different hat because she wanted her mum's. Everything that matters goes in the same place. Ellie called on New Year's Day. She'd spent the evening at a friend's place in the annex and she sounded like herself, the version that exists without someone else's opinion as a constant low-grade weather system. Happy New Year, Dad. Happy New Year, Ellie. A pause. Comfortable. The kind you can only have with someone who doesn't need you to fill it. I applied, she said, to U of T, January 1st, midnight. First thing in the new year. I didn't say anything for a moment. Just sat in the kitchen in Burlington with the light off and the street lights coming through the window and the sound of the year beginning outside. Your mother, I said, would have made you a cake. Ellie laughed. The real kind. She would have made it from scratch and it would have taken 3 days, and she would have stress texted you the whole time. And it would have been extraordinary. It would have been extraordinary, Ellie agreed. We talked for another hour. About the program, about her apartment, about whether she wanted to do something for my birthday in February, about nothing in particular, in the easy way that becomes possible when a year of held breath finally gets released. At some point she said, Dad? Yeah, in the car when you left that Sunday. Before you called me, what were you thinking? I thought about that kitchen table in November, the dinner getting cold, the way Ellie had looked at her plate. I was thinking about your mum, I said, the way she used to say that the job isn't to protect people from everything hard. It's to make sure they have something solid to stand on when the hard thing comes. Ellie was quiet. I was trying to be that, I said. Something solid. Another pause. Then quietly, you were. We said goodnight. I sat in the kitchen for a while longer, made tea, put a butter tart on a plate, because the container was still there from when Ellie brought them, and they were good, and January had just started. And there was nothing wrong with a butter tart at 11 on a quiet night. Through the window, the first snow of the new year was starting to come down, soft and steady, the kind that doesn't make any noise. I sat there and watched it for a while and let it be enough.